Pretty good.
Pretty good. Did you get what you needed?
I did. Well, not really, because he didn't send me a copy of the lease back.
Oh. Ah.
But we came to terms, so that was good.
Awesome. So this last week's been a little bit interesting. We were talking last week about all the just different stereotypes and biases people have, and Kamala had just been named as the vice presidential candidate, and we talked about how it's going to start soon as far as the angry black woman stuff.
Right.
And guess what? It's happening.
But it's interesting when you can already expect it. When you understand the climate, you already expect it. So
yeah,
it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. So we, that's you already called it.
Well, sometimes it's good to know what's coming, right?
Well,
we don't get shocked anymore.
The challenge is that with the people who don't know and they don't understand, it's a new dynamic for them.
Right.
It's a new dynamic for them. So
say more about that.
Say it again.
Say more about that new dynamic for who?
Well, but here's the deal: when you've had limited or no exposure, all you know is what people tell you. And if you don't, that dynamic of an angry black woman, you don't, until you had that exposure, or or understand what that's really about. It's too late once you figure it out. It's too late once you figure it out, particularly in this case, because you won't figure it out because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. What people are telling you, you're seeing with your eyes because that's what you're looking for. You're not looking for the dynamics around what this conversation is.
Right.
It says, and if the person appears to be angry because they're forceful and they're not letting you run over top of them, then they're angry.
Right.
And at some point,
and part of that is the story model in coaching, right? We have an experience, we make a judgment about it, and then our brains just go look for evidence to justify our judgment.
Well, and that's the deal. And I say this one right here. I said, when you ask your brain a question, your brain is responsible to find an answer. Doesn't matter if the answer is right or wrong, your brain will find an answer. And the more things,
and usually the path of least resistance.
Right, exactly. And in that space, when that happens, it's nothing that you can say. I say that all the time. Humans, the brain, and electricity all have something in common. They're like water, air, and electricity. They look for the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
So
88% of what we do is habitual, and because our brains take the path of least resistance.
It's electrical.
Yeah.
Your brain is neurons, electric. It's energy. Yeah. And energy always takes the path of least resistance. And that's what you get. So we'll see how it all plays out. This is going to be interesting. How the narrative lays out, because we just don't know what lengths or what measures people will do or what they'll go to validate themselves. Right. We have no clue, none. We have no clue the level of insults. We have no clue the level of ethics. We just don't have a clue.
We've gotten glimpses, and I think it's been a lower level than I would have anticipated. I don't think we know how low we can go.
And that's like this whole post office thing, right? the whole post office thing, what they were really anticipating is that they would move us, they would move the machines and nobody would really pay much
Care.
attention to it, because what they were saying is that the machines were due to be, they were scheduled to be removed. They were out of date machines, so they were scheduled to come out of service, right?
Right.
And taking those machines out of service would save money. Well, what they were hoping is that they would take enough machines out of place before anybody would recognize it, and then it would be too late to put them back because they'd be disassembled.
Right.
Which is what happened in a lot of places. They took the machines out of place. They can't be reassembled. You can't put them back at this point because they're disassembled to that place. But here's the crazy part. I know in my business, if I have a piece of machinery that is outdated and is scheduled to be removed, I would have a replacement to replace that machine when I took that machine out of service.
Yep.
So why would you take machines out of service without a replacement? And you already know that it's going to hamper and hinder the system of delivery. You know something funny? While we talk, oh, this is in DC, in Washington, DC, the mailman is delivering mail at 9 o'clock at night.
Wow. Why? Because it slowed the process that much?
I can't answer. I didn't ask the mailman, but I have some friends that live in DC and they say their mailman is delivering mail at 9 o'clock at night.
Wow. That's crazy.
I don't think in the history of postal delivery services that they've delivered at 9 o'clock at night.
Maybe when they were on the horseback, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was reading this last week a lot about tribalism,
Okay.
and how that shows up. And it made me think that, you know, we all have a deep need in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We all have a deep need for community.
Yes.
Right? It's safety and security, physical needs met first, and then love, connecting, belonging, and community. And so our country has divided itself in a lot of cases among racial lines, but also tribal lines,
Right.
Which I think can be healthy if you belong to a marginalized populace, but gets to a point of unhealthiness when your tribe now excludes people. And we see it everywhere. We see it in offices, in companies,
Right.
in families even. And I was just thinking about what are the inadequacies in the human brain that make us do that, self-segregate, and then say we don't want other people in our circle.
Well, you know, I think is a part of it is socialization in America. I can only speak for America because I've only lived. And I would imagine that it does happen in other societies. I believe that we probably have it a little worse because we've been socialized to a place to believe that everything fits into one or two buckets. One of two buckets, and then one of four buckets. You have the haves and the have-nots, right? And then it's more than four buckets, but it's really only two dominant buckets. And then it falls into the black and white bucket. And somebody says, well, they're different. They're more than the black and white bucket. They're more than just black and white people. They're really more than black and white people. However, anybody that's non-black, whites identify with them a little differently than they do blacks.
Yeah.
And I can, like, if this is a help thing right here. If you take Asians, right? That's not the preferred group of quote unquote this group of white imperialists, right? That's not their group of people. However, they will accept them in certain places because they're good at math, or they're good at, you know what I mean? They'll accept other cultures for one reason or another. The blacks have been excluded almost completely from anything. Right. Does that make sense?
It does. My brain just went again to the stereotypes. Yeah. Right. And I was thinking, well, okay, we can definitely say Asians of all countries are assumed to be good in math.
Right.
Women that are of Asian descent are, sweet and subservient. We make these generalizations.
Right.
And what are the generalizations? And a lot of times they're positive, right? They're focused on the strengths of that community. And then I thought, well, what are the generalizations typically focused on in the Black community? And it's the negatives.
Right.
Other than the only thing that popped into my head, honestly, was, well, and we've talked about this before. You're a big guy and you're Black. You must have played football or basketball and been good at it.
In the stereotype comes, and I'm saying this, I'm just being transparent where it's come from. Just through history, the Black male has been a threat. Has always been a threat.
Yeah.
You can't bring any positive attributes to someone who threatens you, because you always want to make sure that you keep your foot on their neck for whatever reason.
So you really, societally, then you actually have to dehumanize.
Correct. Never mind, and I'm going to say this, never mind the African culture, between African culture and the Asian culture, they have actually civilized the world. If you just take a look at the contributions to society as a whole, they've civilized the world. Yeah. Because 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, between the two cultures, and I'm just going to say the African culture, it's proven that in Kemet, in Egypt, they had running water. So they had running water then. It's proven that when you go into the temples, how developed they were with just their social infrastructure. And just in and of itself, that monument behind me, to be built when it was built, was totally inconceivable to the rest of the world. And nobody still knows how they built it right till the day that long ago. So,
and what's really interesting, Emerick, I watch History Channel a lot. I love history. And I know just from being around in our culture, there are a lot of Americans, white Americans, who would not automatically think that the Egyptians were Black.
Right, exactly.
They have somehow I just saw a picture of white Jesus, the other day. It's amazing how critical thinking has not shown up for a while.
Right. And so when you start to look at that, and you just have to just examine, if you just examine it just on its face value of making an attempt to dehumanize that group of people, just look at and not know nothing. Show, if that's your thought of superiority, right? Show me a monument anywhere in Europe that matches that monument right there during that time period.
Doesn't exist.
Not at all.
No.
Right? And the truth is that when Alexander the Great, when he actually went and they finally conquered, that's where Alexandria came from. And then when everything turned over, they burned all of the libraries, which actually had the information of how this was all done, the documentation of how these structures and how this community was created, they burned the libraries.
Yep.
So historical record of it is just gone.
And our engineers can't figure it out now.
And it still can't figure it out.
Well, then you watch the other programs and it was the aliens.
I don't know anything about that because I don't even watch stuff like that.
Oh, great show, Ancient Aliens. You should watch it. It's really great.
Really?
Basically
Okay.
says all of our religious figures were aliens.
So you do understand why there's no nose on the Sphinx, right?
I would have just assumed over years it's
No.
why?
When they came over and they conquered, they shot the noses off the figures so that you could not distinguish what the facial features were.
Interesting.
So you would not know that it was that the facial features were that of a Black person. So they shot all of the noses off of, they damaged them, all of the noses, so you couldn't see the facial features.
That's fascinating.
So why, if they eroded that way, why is it that only the facial features and the noses don't really, just look at it?
Yeah.
Interesting, huh?
It is. It is. And if we come even into the 19th and 20th century, I was talking to a friend last night about the movie Hidden Figures, which I haven't watched for a few years, but
right.
Again, all that history lost. Thank God somebody brought it to a movie. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's about NASA and how it was basically 3 Black women that got us to the moon and back.
So, it's interesting. If you really look back into like history, you would be shocked. You would be shocked at the contributions and what really happened during the evolution of time.
Yeah.
Emerick, can I just chime in and say thank you for opening our eyes to when you look back at history, what I'm finding is I'm looking back at the history that was provided to me, right. And it's accurate. And that's what's been the biggest eye opener, is challenging what we've known as fact and understanding what really is.
Mm-hmm. It's actually scary. It's actually scary when you start to look at it, because just the manipulation, and for those who seek more knowledge, it works well. For those who don't challenge the reality that was presented to them, it's scary because they don't really want to know the truth. So,
Emerick, I'm sure you have somewhere some good history books. Could you forward titles or authors?
Absolutely. There's one simple book that would just blow your mind. It's called 300. It's in my house. 365 Days Black. It will blow your mind.
Ordering today. Nikki's already on the computer. I can see her typing away.
That's what I was just doing. Wait a minute. Let me just make sure. Yep, 365 Days of Real Black History.
Of real Black history.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And then there's another one, When the World Was Black.
When the World Was Black.
Mm-hmm. And it just gives you an idea. It's kind of those. It's not really scary, just like, wow.
So I have a COVID question.
Okay.
And again, this is coming from a lot of my biases and assumptions.
Okay.
And I have perceived that the Black community tends to be a lot more social interactions, parties, barbecues, whatever, than than the white community. And I say that because I lived in a neighborhood for 6 years that was all Black. I was the only white person. And the number of parties that we had were daily, basically.
Okay.
And it was awesome.
And it was all around food.
It was food and music. It was a constant block party.
Right.
And I thought this week, it's tough enough. I live out rurally. Gail and I don't get out much. We're being still very, very safe, but it's okay because we weren't overtly social before, right? I got my fix by going into the office. But we don't belong to a community that's overtly social. And I'm guessing this has been harder to be isolated inside the Black community. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is. It is, because community is a huge item for us. It is community. It's a huge item for us. And
that's one of the strengths of your market center. I mean, obviously it's, a microcosm of the larger Black community, but you got a lot of people physically into your office like we do for our office meetings. Are you doing those yet?
No. Because one of the big challenges, just the number of underlying health issues that sometimes that we are predisposed to. I think it would be irresponsible to do that. Not that we don't want to. Let me make that clear. But it would be irresponsible, because there's just a certain number of people, hypertension, diabetes, just things that compromise your system, which sometimes makes Black folks more susceptible.
Well, let's go there for a minute. Why are hypertension and diabetes larger in the Black community?
Historic eating habits.
Again, around food, right?
Right, around food. But you got to remember, wrap your brain around this. Right? I got one more book for you.
Ready.
Golden Age of the Moor.
Of the Moor?
Yeah, Moor. The Moors were Northern African Blacks that in the early turn of BC, in the early turn of the century, they actually conquered Spain, Greece, all of those countries. They actually ruled those countries. It's really interesting, and it's just the architecture and the history and the evolution of why things are the way they are in some of those countries. It'll give you an idea of some other things. But you won't ever find anything about the Moors in the history book. You probably never even heard of the Moors. Have you ever heard of the Moors?
I have, from a religious context, though.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a part of it. So you'll see it when you see the golden age of the Moors. You'll find out why it was so earth-shattering in religion too. Okay, but anyway, eating habits. You got to remember, for us, I want you to wrap your brain around this, and this comes back from slavery. The food that we ate as a group of people were the scraps. So the food that we look at as soul food, I'm gonna run the list down for you. Pig feet, chitlins, right?
I never thought about that.
But that's what they gave the slaves to eat. The feet, because who wants to eat the feet? Who wants to eat the intestines? Who wants to eat the ears? Who want to eat the tail? You want the bacon, right? Yeah. You get what I'm saying? So when you take a look at all of those parts, even liver and intestines, yeah. And so these are the things that we ate. right? And just whatever somebody else didn't want, that's what we ate, and that was the meat. So you wrap your brain around that. When you look at that, just the content of, and then how we had to season and how we had to, what we had to put in it to make it taste better, right? And that's where the seasoning come in. And you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And now you think about that, this has been a primary source of your diet for 400 years, 375 years. Now, think how that has the ability to make you predisposed to certain things.
I really, truly never, ever thought about that.
Right. Wrap your brain around that.
Yeah.
Because guess what? When Native Africans come to America, they don't have the same health challenges.
Right. Very interesting.
So
let's go back to, so the social impacts of not being social. How are you seeing this now long term, and probably going to be a lot longer term, isolation showing up for your agents or just the community in general?
You know what? That's a great question. I'm not really sure. But what I can tell you is that, there's some people that I come encounter with, some of my friends, they have become a lot more reserved and retreated, which can be, I'm not sure, I'm not a psychologist, but it's probably a different type of depression a different way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because they're actually to the point where they're retreating, which is a little scary.
What do you mean by retreating?
They have no desire to be social in any way other than the people who are in their household. I got a couple people like that. Like now they're at the place where they won't, even if they could go to a restaurant, they won't go to a restaurant. They won't, even if you say outdoor seating, they still won't leave their house. And
is that coming from fear? Or they just have gotten used to it? Or do you think it is situational depression?
I think part of it is situational depression and part of it is fear. But fear will cause you to have situational depression. It's almost a place of learned helplessness.
Yeah.
It's almost a place of, psychological, it's almost a place of learned helplessness. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can change. So I'm not going to do anything different because this is my reality. Yeah. And they're ordering from, and I think this is a little scary. What's the little grocery place where you put your order in online and they deliver your food to your house so you don't have to leave your house?
Amazon Fresh, or?
Not Amazon Fresh, it's another one.
I'm not familiar with it.
That's become really, really popular.
Wow.
Instacart.
Instacart, yeah, Instacart. Yeah, and I'm just telling you, Instacart, and just as a culture, and I'm only speaking from Emerick's perspective and just talking to people, Instacart was something that Black folks typically would not have done, because we're like really big on going to the store and picking out our own fruits and vegetables, because I don't know what you're gonna do to my food before I get it. I'm just telling you, just having somebody like deliver your food is like, no, that's okay, I'll go pick it up. That's like if you ever go out to dinner with Black people, a lot of times, and the server says, I will box up your food, give me your food, I'll box it up. Most of my friends say, no, you bring the carry out to me, I'll box it up myself. Because they don't want their food delivered to the table because they're afraid of what you might do to their food when you take it out to the back. Wow. Even though it's the same person that brought you your food in the first place, it's kind of interesting. No, I'll fix my food. I'll box my food up right here at the table. And they will do it all the time. And I'm like, well, didn't the same person just brought you your food? but you won't let them take your food out to the back to box it up as a carry out. It's the most bizarre thing. Look, I see Nikki shaking her head. You seen that before, Nikki?
Full disclosure, I worked restaurants for 6 years, my first job, so I totally understand this.
But yeah, because I mean, you know, and again, so Instacart, I got more friends now doing Instacart than I would have ever thought.
Are you doing it?
Hell no. I'm not doing that. You know, I mean, you like I said, I believe that in this space that you damage yourself when you become a recluse to that place where you alter your life, where you won't even function in your normal part of life.
Yeah.
Probably for me, I know what the government does. And it's unfortunate that it is that way. I know what the government does. The government, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, just so we're clear, the government puts you in a place where they paralyze you to not want to think for yourself.
That's how you keep the masses in control. Government and
Exactly.
religion do the same thing.
Exactly. They don't, and so at that place, if they can paralyze you to the place where you don't think about for yourself, then you become dependent on the information that's given to you. And the truth is, we're never given all of the information.
No.
You know, that again, coming back to A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth, you know?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. It's like the whole thing about the president. It doesn't matter who the president is. It does not matter. They all have an overarching responsibility not to tell the American public the truth, or give the American public a limited truth of enough that they can deal with. Because it's so deep. It didn't just get this way in the last 4 years. It wasn't that way for the 8 years that President Obama was in office. It didn't get that way for the 8 years that George Bush was in office. We cannot handle the systemic.
So having said that, and I'm starting to really get that and grasp that, understanding that, how can we solve problems we don't know the entirety of? And how do you not fall into somewhat despair and hopelessness?
Because you really have to be local. You have to be able to control your environment locally and hyperlocal.
Yeah.
And beyond that, you can't do anything about it. I know it sounds like a depressing thought, but the truth
it can
is,
be. That's why I'm asking. So how do you make it not depressing? And it's back to that hyperlocal focus.
you again, local and hyperlocal. There's some things on the map that you can't deal with. You would drive yourself crazy making an attempt to even deal with it, right? Because it's bigger than you, and you can't convince enough people to want to. You can't convince enough people to want to move in that direction, and you can't keep enough people moving in that direction for a sustainable amount of time to even make the change.
I'm assuming, though, that doesn't mean you don't participate in the federal elections.
No. That's not what you do. You still participate. You still play your part. You still do the things you can do. But at a deeper level, there's absolutely nothing that you can do.
Gotcha.
There's absolutely
That's
nothing.
for local, and it's got to spread from there.
Yes, and you have to be able to affect the change around you. And that's the reason why local elections are so important. Local elections are more important than federal elections.
For sure.
And that's the conversation that we have to have about being local and hyperlocal. Because the truth is, let's be real. Congressmen and senators, right? You only get to affect their voice on the things that are public. The things that are not public, they don't give a damn what you think about. They're going with the agenda. That's the reason why you have a bill and there's 50 riders on one bill. Only thing you ever focus on is the public part, which is the bill itself. Nobody ever dissects the riders that are on that bill.
Yeah.
right? And then that's where the stuff that the public does not know and the public can't handle the truth about, that's where all of those details are.
Right.
Because nobody ever talks about that. Nobody ever talks about the riders on the bill. They only talk about the bill itself.
And a lot of times those writers are a lot more impactful than the bill itself.
In the bill itself. Exactly. Exactly. And they get buried in between the paperwork.
Yeah.
Like let's be real. Just think about how much we have no concept of how much money the American government gives to foreign governments to do things that are probably not, if we had to look at it from certain angles, that are probably not in our best interest.
Yep. I just listened to a podcast this week with a former Navy admiral, and he was talking about his push was to keep the military branches as, and it was funny because I went, oh, white hat. You know, in the old movies, anybody with a white hat on was a good guy, and anybody with a black hat was a bad guy.
Right.
Duality of white and black again. But he said we always wanted to keep the arms of the branches of the military as so that the American public would perceive us as good and neutral and good. So when they decided to do all the stuff they do, meaning the government at black sites, he said we got together as all kind of the joint chiefs of the military and said, right, we won't participate in Guantanamo Bay and all the other stuff. Had to be the FBI or CIA. And I went, oh, there's always a way. And gosh knows, well, we can't handle the truth.
No, we can't. We can't. And I learned that from being in the military because I watched some things that the normal public would not see or even understand. And once I watched that for a few years, and I was like, okay, so what is it that we really, really, really don't know? I see what they're telling us, but what is it that we really don't know? And I can say this, and it is nothing. When I worked on Andrews Air Force Base, where the home of Air Force One, the president flies out, and the senators, and like back in the 90s, I want you to wrap your brain around this. And this is like, I'm like a really super analytical person sometimes. And they would come back off these fact-finding missions, right?
Okay.
And there would be like one or two senators that had to go to, I'm just going to throw a place out there, they had to go to the Far East. But they would take 2 airplanes full of people for these 2 congressmen to go on a fact-finding mission in the Far East. When those airplanes came back, they would literally have a caravan of trucks unloading the cargo from these airplanes. What it really was a big shopping trip. They would take 2 airplanes and all of their friends and whoever else wanted to go on the government's dime. They would fly to the Far East. They would go shopping, and they always did it right before Christmas.
Wow.
And they would go and they would literally bring back trucks and trucks and trucks of goods and things. And there's no customs because they're who?
Senators.
There's no customs. So whatever they brought back, they went to these, and I started right. It's like, what else are we not being told? If the American public knew exactly what the things that happen, that's just touching the surface.
Yeah, that's just scratching the surface. But if that's happening every year, and taxpayer dollars are funding that whole thing, my goodness.
Not just every year, it happened a few times a year, but Christmas was the big time. Or, not naming any names, you generate an airplane. You generate an airplane because you go to the West Coast and you literally generate one airplane so the dog can fly to California. You know how much it costs to generate one airplane?
Wow.
So you spend $40,000 for your dog to fly to California for 3 days.
Wow.
Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Just that was the matter of fact. The only two things were on the airplane was the dog and the dog handler and the pilots.
And I'm sure a lot of these politicians are the ones that are also saying people are so entitled, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it changed that changed my perception of a lot of things.
Yeah.
It just in my years of watching what actually happens and just understanding, that we really don't control anything. And we just have to stay hyper local and local and hyper local, and that's how we affect change in our world.
That's true. So Trish just said, and I think you're absolutely right, Trish. I've got to blow this up a little bit so I can read it fully. That's why there are so many women and men and women of color running and winning public offices. Hopefully they'll make real changes from the inside and we can support and vote for them. Yep. When we first started these, I said, imagine if we could ever see, the Senate or Congress being 50-50, people of color and white. And you said that ain't ever going to happen. I'm still going to hold out hope.
You know what? It probably could come close, but that's still, but at the end of it does not represent the demographics of America, though.
Right.
So that's the reason why I said that, because it does not represent the demographics of America, and neither does the other side where there's like a 0.5% representation.
Let's find somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it doesn't represent America. So one way or another.
But honestly, just those two stories about the dog and the shopping trips makes total sense why these politics get so out of hand, because they don't want any actual public servants finding that out. And they've got to protect that power structure and that access. And
that's just the tip of the iceberg. Think about this, right? And this is not a political conversation. This is a conversation about entitlement, right?
Yeah.
If this group of people can do the things that they do for themselves, what are they doing against the rest of the people? How many terms? I think after one term, is it 1 term or 2 terms that you get a retirement for the rest of your life?
2.
2, right? So after 2 terms, after either 12 years or 4 years, you get benefits for the rest of your life. Yeah. No, I think Senator's 1 year, 1 term, isn't it?
I think in everything it's 2, at least. I don't know.
I know Congressman is 2 years.
2 terms.
Even 2 terms, my fault. But even if not, right? Just wrap your brain around that. The benefits. But you're making a decision for other people's benefits.
I don't know what's worse, though, retiring after 2 terms or being there for 50 terms.
Oh,
being there for a lifetime.
That's scary, because public servant means that you serve your time and you go back to your community. And
it might be a better use of taxpayer money to pay them to get out.
Right. Well, why don't we just make a better retirement plan so they can leave early? But there's no power there. And so, like, in that structure, though, like, if you really think about just the social dynamics of that structure does not lend itself, or has nothing to do with making the social environment of the world better.
Oh, no. It's aimed at, and I believe this is both parties, it currently making the rich richer, right? Making the divide bigger.
Yeah. Because if we really had to break it down as to just from a policy perspective, they really don't focus on society. They focus on the business structure, what makes good business sense.
Yeah.
For the 1% that's wealth is growing, not the masses of the people. Even though the masses put them in office, it has not been beneficial to the rest of society. It has not.
Yeah.
But then the conversation comes, if we make it better for the rich people, then they can make it better for the other people.
Oh, the trickle down.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's that working?
Oh, if you have trickle down economics in your market center.
Certainly.
So it works for you. Why can't it work for everybody else?
Because our structure actually does reward people for their participation versus just taking and hoarding.
Tell me more. What do you mean by it?
Well, with profit share.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We're sharing back quite a bit of the money we actually make.
Right.
Unequal reward because not equal participation by everybody.
Right.
But that's part of the trickle down. I think when you're talking about government structures, it may trickle down, but it's not trickling down it's trickling down just to keep people in survival.
Right. Well, I don't look at profit share as trickle down. I think of it as flowing down, because 48% of the profits is not a trickle. That is not a trickle. There's some other structures that have trickle, but that's not a trick. So your market center is not a trickle. And that was, by the way, that tricked you into that. I just want you to know that.
That's all good.
I baited you into
it allows me to pitch Linda McKissick doing a Zoom for us on September 1st on wealth building.
Okay, cool.
11 a.m.
11 a.m. So
Pacific.
That's not a trickle. That's a flow. That's a flow.
Yeah.
That is a flow, because I looked at it, and we profit shared more than $4 million to our agents so far.
That's awesome.
So just think about that. $4 million that we've dispersed to our agent population. And so, and again, and now I'm going to go black for a second.
I'm going to go back and check our lifetime profit share.
And so for us, when we said in our community, in the Black community, I can't think of a conversation, a dialogue we're having with it says somebody has actually given, a company has actually given $4 million of its own profit back into that community.
I don't think black or white community. I mean, truly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just in community at all. And so, that's a struggle. That's a struggle for us, and that I'm facing in the community itself, because part of the dialogue is why would you guys do that? Why are you doing that? What's the benefit in you? And so in the Black community, there's always this skepticism about why good things are happening.
Well, I think that's an American issue.
Right.
Honestly, I don't even explain the 48% anymore because either number one, people don't believe it, or they think you're crazy if you're an owner and you're doing that. Right. I talked to Remax owners years ago and they go, why the hell would I give 48% of my profits away? Okay.
Well, here's the deal. You get 52% of $1 million as opposed to 100% of 200,000.
Yeah.
You increase.
Remember, you pick your battles.
Exactly. And so, but I brought up that point about skepticism in our community, and I get it. It's anywhere. It's everywhere. The level of
you've given us actually several different examples I wouldn't have thought about, like the carryout food.
Right. but that's the skepticism, because being socialized in America, and you come from a community that's marginalized, whatever, just think of that. And a friend of mine says this. He says that when white folks catch a cold, or when white folks sneeze, black people catch the flu. So whatever's happening in America as a norm, the microcosm of what happens in the community is
it's amplified.
Put it this way. It's like it's the ripple effect, right? The ripple or the wake of a boat at the place where the wake actually happens is totally different 20 feet away.
Yep.
So, and again, that's the thing that happens. And I brought that up specifically because one part we were talking about profit share, and the other part is that sometimes when we start to look at why things are the way that they are, because they present themselves totally different in other communities. And the issue and the big challenge is that the majority population, the white population, they don't see it that way because that's not their reality.
Right.
It's not their reality, which is a different.
Well, I think, yeah, for sure. And I'm sure there's been conversations we've had where my first thought is, well, that can't be true. Only because it's not my reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or it challenges your conventional teaching.
Well, a lot of these conversations have definitely done that, and I think that's what Nikki was alluding to too. And especially early on in our conversations, Emerick, the foundation of everything I believe has been shaken.
Right.
And that has to happen. We all have to be in this uncomfortable place in order to get to what is bedrock truth, and then make things better.
And so for you, like where you are right now, and just the time that the opportunity that these 3 months have like given you to take a look at things, what would you say is the biggest fundamental change for you and your thought around just race, history, America?
I think the biggest thing that, if we're really talking fundamental, foundational for me, is challenge and find additional evidence for everything I believe.
Okay. Everything, or?
Honestly, I'm taking a look at everything.
Really? Mm-hmm. How do you do that though? How do you look at everything? I don't. For me, maybe just my pea brain, and just the idea of everything. I can't conceptualize everything, but help me out.
Well, okay, so I'll say everything that's conscious, right?
Okay.
So, because there's a lot of subconscious. I just had a conversation this morning with Terry Barton, one of our agents, that she said, how do you access your subconscious? And I said, you can't, it's not an active will. You can, I do it in my morning walks. Right. That's where I can observe my thinking and start identifying what my subconscious is programmed to. That's what I'm questioning.
And so that's the thing that I call investigating your reality.
Yeah. Instead of taking it for granted and knowing what I know, now I'm questioning what I know. Yeah.
Okay. Now that makes sense. Now you got me. And that's what I call it. You investigate your reality, because, your reality is your reality. However, is that the way things really are? Or is that what you accept because that's beneficial to you? Because we accept the things that are beneficial to us, and the things that aren't beneficial to us, we discard, discredit, and throw off to the side, and keep moving down our path of least resistance.
Yep.
Which is interesting. So that's one of the things that people ask me all the time. I tell people I'm living the dream, and people say, "How you doing, Emerick?" I'm living the dream. What the hell? How do you live in the dream? Tell me what the dream is. And then I have to break it down to them, because I look at it from a perspective when I talk about investigating my reality. I look at where I came from. I look at my social environments as I've developed. I take a look at, where most of my family is. I take a look at, the Black community as a whole. Then I expand that and I take a look at America as a whole. Then I take a different look and I look at the world as a whole. And then I come out with this, my final analysis is this. I am living in America with better than first world problems, right? And at that point, I'm living a dream because there's probably 98% of the population of the world that would love to be me.
It's so interesting because as many times as I've asked you, hey, how you doing? Every single time you say, living the dream. And I don't have a whole lot of victim thinking, but there have been times when you saying that to me, I've gone, oh, let that first world problem go, where we are absolutely living the dream.
Yeah, and I'm saying this way, right? I got it, and I'm not saying any. I'm gonna put this lightly. Me being who I am. Think about this for a second. Or you being who you are, or any of us being who we are, right? We go to settlement, and we can get a $12,000, $13,000 check. One check.
To move to San Diego.
Huh? Okay, my fault. You get a $25,000 check. I'm only talking about 12 or 13. You're getting a $25,000 check. Do you understand that that's what some people live off of for 3 years? Right? And then if you understand that that's somebody's yearly salary, do we understand that is like, if somebody had $25,000, that would literally change their entire life. Think about that for a second.
There's another book, if anybody's interested, it's not around race, but it's called, hang on, it's called Naked. And it is a very long audible where they've pieced together all these spiritual and influential authors doing audios of their work. Right. And one of them yesterday I was listening to said, here we are complaining, even a really poor family in America, if they make $15,000 or $20,000 a year.
Yes. In
the vast majority of the world, people are making less than $1,000 a year.
Wrap your brain around that. And so when that context of living the dream, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the number, but I just got an email from a number, and it's opportunity. Don't get me wrong. It's things that we have put in place to work this way, but I just got an email for a number that's going to be deposited today, which I would have never thought. I just wouldn't have thought in my lifetime I would get that deposit, and I didn't even know I was getting. Huh?
Drinks on Emerick.
I wouldn't even. It's crazy. So living the dream. And then, but the thing about this though, where you have to stay grounded, is that where I have to be really careful. And now I'm going a little transparent for me. I have to be careful where I don't adapt that mentality where I say, if I can do it, anybody can do it, because that's bullshit. That's if I can. And so sometimes people say that, and I've heard some people in some circles, some Black folks in some circles say, well, if I can do it, anybody can do it. No. That theoretically, that's true.
Yeah.
From an ideological perspective, if you break it down, no, they can't.
Yeah.
No, they can't. Because I think I've said this to you before. When we're born, everybody has the exact same opportunity. When we come out to shoot, we have the exact same opportunity. The thing that changes is who you go home with. That's when the opportunity changes.
Yeah.
But being born in this world, we all have the same opportunities. Yes, we do. When a doctor slaps you, the opportunity is the same. When those people wrap you up in that blanket and take you home, the opportunities change.
That is so profound. Yes, you have said it before, but thank you for saying it again.
So anyway, I hit the lottery, by the way.
Yeah.
I hit the lottery by being, I hit the lottery like 3 or 4 times. I hit the lottery by being born in America. I hit the lottery by being born to the family that I was born to. And I hit the lottery when I decided to make some choices in my life that I never knew or understood how they would have a profound effect 40 years later.
Awesome. We hit the lottery because you said yes, and I get to talk to you every Wednesday. So
I hit the lottery.
Sir.
I hit the lottery because you asked me.
So thank you again. It is 9:02. Time
Yeah.
to jump happily into the dream today.
Let's go get it. Let's go knock it out. You
Go
know
get
what? Let's, you know, I don't, do you want to be the best person that you can be?
Do I want to what?
Do you want to be the best person that you can
Absolutely.
be? I don't.
Why?
Because I want to do it the best it can be done.
It's a Gary Kellerism.
So let's just go do it and do it the best it can be done and just maximize our opportunity at that place and be the best person we can be.
Awesome. All right,
Thank you,
everybody.
dear.
Have a great week.
All right. Yes,
See you
yes.
next week.
All right.